All you can take with you is one handbag, some food, and leave everything in the ghetto. Well, one good thing that happened in the ghetto, unfortunately didn't turn out to be good, is that my older brother, who had been a soldier, right, was sent home to the ghetto. So 2 days before we had to leave the ghetto, my other brother arrived. So by now we were again 5 people. Me, my parents, and my 2 brothers. So we did our little package and leave everything open. And you know it had to be left open because they came to see what is in the house, and everything which was good went to Germany, and everything which was not good was left open to be pilfered by the neighbors. We don't know what happened, but all that we brought, very few entered in the handbag. So here now we are 5 people, and we had to gather in the central square. 3,000 people left Szeged on the first day of transportation. You remember Elie Wiesel was in the 4th, 12,000 people were in 4 transports. Elie Wiesel was in the last transport. I was in the first transport. So here 3,000 people are gathered on the main square, and they start to chase us from the main square to the railroad station. And they hit us, and they had dogs after us, and they had arms to beat us, and to go faster and faster. And everybody tried to carry their little, belongings, or to carry a baby. Children were crying, so we took the babies out of stroller. It's so much easier to carry the baby than, push a stroller. And we had to run, and they were hitting us and hitting us. And finally, you look back on the street, and it was strewn with discarded stuff. You could see not only food, bags, even strollers were, discarded, pillowcases were discarded. It was strewn with this discard. Then we had to run and run and run, and we arrived at the railroad station. 3,000 people, the first transport from my hometown, waiting for a train. Suddenly, a long cattle train enters the station. It has 60 cars. And they start to divide 60, 70 people into one car. Whatever I will tell you from now on is here in this picture. These are pictures taken in Auschwitz when a car arrives, not when it leaves Szeged, when the car arrives. But at least, and it's the only time pictures making was allowed in Auschwitz. So we have the first picture, right, the train. You have there the train. So they divide us, okay. They divide us 67 people, right? 67 people into one car, and those cars have no seats, they have no benches, they have no window, just some opening high up. One had to climb on the suitcases to see, right, what is outside. And there was no toilet. They put a bucket in the middle. So 60, 70 people, and they are hitting us and pushing us, and finally they lock it. And they filled the 3,000 people divided in the 60 and the 50 or 60 cars. And now it is dark in the car, okay? There are no seats. There are no benches. You put your belonging and you try to sit, and not everybody can sit. There's no room, okay, for 60 people. These were built for 8 horses, not for 60 people. And finally, when all the 3,000 are divided in those 50 cars, they lock it, and the train left the station. We don't know where it goes. We have the train, okay, only when it arrives. We traveled in those trains for 3 days and 2 nights under terrible conditions. There was no food, only what we brought with us. So maybe for 1 day there was some food. There was no water, and we couldn't get water. Children were crying, they were hungry. Elderly were dying, right? There was no help. And at large stations, the train stopped, and they opened the car, and they asked some people to carry out the overflowing bucket, because can you imagine to use a bucket in the middle? Carry it, empty it, bring it back, and then they asked, are there dead people around? There were always dead people because there were lots of sick people. So they just took them like sacks of potatoes and threw them on the platform. And they locked it, and we went further. And they hardly stopped in 3 days in 1 or 2 places. And I remember in the group close to us was a 5-year-old child. It was a nephew of my boyfriend. And he was crying all the time. I want a little water, I want water, I want water. So we taught him to say in German, please give me a little water. And when the train stopped at a large station, we lifted the baby, the child, right, and he says, give me a little water. Sure, nobody gave him water. So everybody, suffered. As I told you, we didn't have medicine for the sick people. The elderly were dying. And at night, I remember how in the middle, they slept one on top of the other. And I always lie down on my older brother's chest. And I tried to be close to my mother. So I would protect her, she not to be pushed around. And mother and father, they were sweating and praying, right, and crying, and everybody was crying. And this trip lasted for 3 days and 2 nights. My thoughts, later you find out that how soon after the war I wrote all these things. My thoughts were that first the thirst was terrible. The throat was dry, and at a certain point, as the train was riding, I hear some clacking of the wheels, and I see in the window like the arches of a bridge. And I said, the bridge, water under the bridge. If God helps us, the bridge will collapse, and we will die in cold water. Water is such a desperate. Anyway, 3 days passed, and on the last day, the train stopped in the evening, and we arrived at the station. People climbed on the suitcases to see the name of the station. It was in Auschwitz. We didn't know what Auschwitz was. Lots of people knew, but we didn't have too many newspapers, we didn't have radios, we didn't know. I'm telling the students, if you want to know how much the Americans knew, you just go to the public library and ask for a newspaper of that date, and you will see that they wrote how people were taken from this city and left, and they don't know where left. So the train stops, and from outside it's night, and the doors are open, and shots are heard, and dogs are barking, right? And officers are screaming, everybody down, 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 leave everything in the car, you get them back later. And helpers jump up on the car to push them down, faster, faster, push down. The people push the belongings in front, and it is chaos and commotion. People are screaming and dry, and we got down, right, the 5 of us, and try very hard, right, to hold the hands not to get lost. People are crying and looking for each other. You can see on the second picture there, people getting out of the train, 3,000 people, right? And now they're in front of the train, and they're just pushed ahead and pushed and beaten, right, and chased by the dogs. And suddenly we heard on the loudspeaker, men should make separate columns from the women and children. And when my mother heard that my brothers and my father would leave, she just fainted. Now here in the middle of the night, and it's chaos and commotion, everybody's screaming and crying, and the mother is like dead in my arms. And we try to shake her and we tell her, mother, mother, don't, please, please. And finally, when my mother opens her eyes, we are all hugging and crying and kissing. And then my father and my 2 brothers left this group toward the men's group, and I never saw them again. And now I continue with my mother. She's still almost fainted, so I help her, I lift her, And she's crying and crying, saying, Mother, please don't cry, we are together, I'm going to help you. I was very happy that I'm here to help my mother. And I hold her, and now we go with the column. You see it very well here. You will come here to see how this is to show how the man formed another group and the woman another group. And this picture shows how the women are coming to in front of a group of SS officers who are selecting them. And as I am with my mother holding her and trying, to help her, suddenly I look at the end of the column and I see this group of people, the Nazis selecting, and all the young girls are sent to the right. And I say, Mother, they're separating us. And my mother starts screaming, don't leave me, don't leave me. No, Mother, I won't leave you. And I thought, how can I stay with Mother? I'm not old. But then I figured, maybe I can look old. So I put my kerchief over my face. I hold my mother and started to walk like, limping and, bent. And we arrived in front of the selecting committee. Sure, I couldn't fool them. They showed me to go to the right. I don't listen to them. I continue going with Mother to the left. I said, and they scream at me, and I say, no, just to say goodbye. And they sent the helper with a bat, and he hit my arm so hard that I had a glow of Mother. They pulled my mother to the left, and they pushed me to the right. And I looked back, and Mother was screaming and calling my name, right? And this is the last image I have of my mother, right? Crying, screaming, right? Desperate, calling me and extending my arms. This is the image I kept for so many years. And then again, I am pushed to the right, and I look back, I didn't see my mother anymore because other girls were coming, and all the girls were crying. They all left behind, a sister, a mother, a child. If I would stop here, you have the final solution. We have gone through it, right? We were separated in a ghetto, we were put on a train, we arrived to Auschwitz, we were selected. This part of young girls would go to the camp, and all the other parts, which we don't know yet how many they are, would go to the gas chamber. Well, here now I'm going to tell you what happened to the girls. I don't know what happened to the rest. For a long time, I didn't know and I didn't believe that all the others were sent to the gas chamber. When we were in the camp and we were asking where did they go, they were told, the officer said they are children's camp. And, we looked around in the camp and there were 4 crematoriums and they were spewing smoke and smoke. If we asked the old-timers, Polish girls, what are those chimneys? Are they bakeries, factories? I said, you stupid girl, it's your family going out and playing. We didn't want to believe for a long time. So I didn't know for a long time what happened to them. What happened to us? Here we are a group of girls. They chase us through the forest until we meet the building, the gas chamber. And then we enter in a large hall. You see this, the upper picture is a hall. We enter this hall and they told a few hundred girls, take off your clothing, stay only with the shoes, completely naked, keep only the shoes in your hands and a line along the walls. There were men walking around, we had to undress, keep only the shoes, right? And then they counted us, and I wanted you to follow me. I remember I heard counting, 421 in German. I spoke German. 421. Only later did I realize that 421 girls were alive. I didn't know how many men entered the camp. But after the war, when someone came back, we asked them how many men entered that morning in the camp, and they said about 200, because most of the men were still on front. 200. Now figure out, 400 and 200 and 600 out of 3,000 people. and you figure out it is 20%. This was the average. 20% were kept alive the night of arrival. So here we are naked, okay? We are aligned there, and we have to walk, all of us. I mean, there is in the corner, there are stools and barbers, and we all have to go there to be shaved all over. Men are shaving us. I don't have to tell you, the girls are crying. There is a sea of hair, all the colors, all the shapes. They're all crying. They don't even recognize their sister after the hair is cut. After the hair is cut, okay, all over. We go to the next room, which is a dressing room. No, the next room is a shower room. And we get a cold shower for a few minutes, no soap, no towel. We never get soap or towel. Then we are pushed to the other room, which is a dressing room. There is a pile of uniforms and 2 piles of underwear. Each one picks the gray uniform and puts it on, right, and the 2 pieces of underwear. And then we all get out of the building, and here is the picture, which is so famous, of the girls getting out, right, getting into the camp. They are all with gray uniforms, with shaved heads, and you see that they had socks. I was not given socks. And this is how we entered the camp. And by now, it is early morning. We arrived on 17, this was 18 of May, early morning. And we see the camp. And it is an immensity, right, of space and hundreds of barracks in front of us. The barracks are aligned and some ditches or in between them. In Auschwitz at that time, there were at least 25 separate camps. Each one had a name. One row of barracks was one camp. Camp A, Camp B, Camp C, children's camp. What was it? Czech camp, gypsy camp. There were at least 25 camps. So they take us to a building. That building happened to be a brick building. They were wooden buildings and brick buildings. And I want to show you here in front of us there are hundreds of buildings. These pictures were taken by the Americans, you know, from the plane. The hundreds of buildings. They took us to in one camp where the buildings were made of brick. And when they opened the door, this is what one sees. This was the inside of the barrack. They will all come here and study it. As you see, there was all for sleeping hundreds and hundreds of girls. There were 3-tier bunk beds, 3-tier built-in bunk beds. Look, 1, 2, 3. I went back 50 years ago on pilgrimage and I made a picture. So this was my bed. So first they divide about 8 girls in the middle bed, 8 girls in the upper, and they put the shoes on the cement. When more girls come, more girls here, more girls there. When more girls arrive the following morning, take the shoes, put it under your head, and they put it on the cement door. Girls. And they put no mattresses, no blankets, no pillows, no nothing. And how the 12 girls can sleep, such we slept. Right? We slept. Can you imagine? It's like sardines in a can. On the right side, all was turned to the right. Left side, all turned to the left. And if somebody was fidgety and moved in the middle of the night, we screamed at her because we all had to change position. So how can you sleep, right, with no pillow, you couldn't cover yourself? And here are the legs of this one, and here the legs of that one, and here the mouth of the other one. It was terrible, okay? So this is how we slept. Now let me tell you a day in the camp, okay? At the beginning, many things changed over the months because I was 7 months in Auschwitz. Early morning, the sirens, sounds, it must have been 4 o'clock because the stars were still out. And the sirens sound in the whole camp, everybody's chased out for roll call. I want to go to the bathroom, I cannot go. to the roll call, and we had to stay in front of the barrack, 5 in a row, right? Until the supervisors come from one camp to another, and make sure that nobody's missing, right? And the report is given that nobody's missing. It's freezing cold at 3 o'clock, even in summer, right? And I just remember that the way we stayed is I was the oldest. I was 22. I was the oldest, and I was always in the back. I could take the cold in in my back. And we had the younger ones, the 14 and 15, in the middle. They were cousins. And try to protect them. And you had to stay for hours, and sometimes you couldn't hold it. After a few hours, the roll call is over, sirens will sound again, and we can go break the lines. And where do we run? We run. We have to go to the bathroom. This is the bathroom. If you have ever seen a latrine, this is the latrine. And it had in the middle a cesspool, and they had two seats, right, made of plank with hundreds of holes. You had to stay in line to get to a hole. And when finally you arrived there was no toilet paper. There was never toilet paper. And after that, we came back we had to come back to our barracks because the breakfast is being brought. Now let me tell you the food in the camp. This breakfast, a few girls were taken to the kitchen to bring the cauldrons of tea. Cauldron of some sort of tea. They served the tea in a bowl for 5 girls with no spoon and no cup. We had to learn how to divide that. And we got to a point where we said there are 7 mouthfuls you can take, no more. And if there's not enough for the last one tomorrow, you get another one. We never fought with our friends from our hometown. Then bread was brought, brick bread, and they cut it very regularly. We all voted, do I get a big piece or a small piece? I always got a small piece, I don't know why. They put a piece of margarine or marmalade in a day, and this was the daily ration of bread. No more bread on that day. At noon, they brought from the kitchen a vegetable soup, some greenish concoction made of green vegetable, of cabbage, of turnips, or whatever, right? Everything was green, and we could drink it. So again, it was served in a bowl, one bowl for the 5 girls. I never saw a piece of meat for a whole year. I didn't have meat, I didn't have eggs, I didn't see milk, I didn't see nothing nutritious. Not to mention that some girls couldn't even taste it. They became nauseous from it. So this was at lunch, and that was for dinner. And obviously, in no time, the girls started to lose weight. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, when they had lost already some, and they didn't do good selections when they arrived, they declared a selection in the best house. So now you have to go to the best house and walk naked in front of those selecting, right? And if they saw that you are very skinny, or that you are scratched because immediately you got to be infested with lice, you go to the right and you go to the left. And to see when 2 sisters are separated, or 2 friends, it was heartbreaking because they would go any place just to be together. And they were beaten. And this was often the selection, quite often while I was in camp. At that time, we did not work in the first few weeks. We did not work for 6 weeks, while every day 3-4 trains arrived from Hungary. Every day. Until 450,000 Jews were brought to Auschwitz in the 6 weeks. And as you know from before, 80% probably were killed the same night. 6 weeks later, after night, everybody who was brought from our hometown who was alive. 6 months later, one morning, we are ready to march right out of the barrack. Hold it, we have a selection. And now we are dressed, not naked. And I don't know how it happened, that I was the only one from my row of 5 to be on the right side. You go out, you go out. And we didn't know what is the good place to stay in, in the formation or to be selected. We never knew what is the good side. But I was in those few who were taken out. And what happened, all those were taken to that building where we arrived initially, the office, and we were all tattooed. Here is my tattoo, A7603. You come later and you see the tattoo. 6 weeks later, I was tattooed. And the meaning of the tattoo was I was registered, I had to sign my name, my everything, right? And from now on, I stayed in Auschwitz and I worked in Auschwitz. Immediately, this group who got the number, right, was taken to another barrack and they started to work. And I stayed 7 months in Auschwitz. And all those who were separated from me disappeared from the camp, and I have no idea where my friends are, whether they are alive or not. Only after the war did I find out what happened to them. And hardly did I have someone I know. I had to work together with girls speaking all the languages. Some were Greek, and some were French, and some were Dutch. All languages, I couldn't talk to them, but we all worked together in factories or outside. 7 more months, 7 months in Auschwitz. At this time, there was, I would say, that the most, more suffering, and the most was the hunger. People were so hungry all the time. And people were selected because they lost their job. They lost weight. Then there was the hard work. There was the beatings. No matter what you did or didn't, they didn't talk to you. They hit you. They always hit you. Then we got infested with lice. There were so many lice that we didn't kill them anymore. We just started to shake them down, right? But then we scratched ourselves. And some girls got sick and were taken to the infirmary. That was a lot of suffering. I have even, I don't know if I sent you the story of beatings. Did I? Did you read some of the stories? No. Okay. So many things happened at the 7 months in Auschwitz. And I didn't talk about it for a very long time. You will find out what happened after the war. But when my first granddaughter was born, and her name was Miriam, and I lived in New York, and I worked as a physician, right? And here suddenly I have a granddaughter, and I started to think, how will this child know what happened to me, my parents, my brothers? Unless I tell her, will I live that long until they grow up? I didn't know I would be so old. So I started to write stories to my granddaughter Miriam, letters to Miriam. And every time I came from work and something happened, reminded me of something else, right? I was, for instance, I remember there was, I was marched to work and suddenly I was marching. I was driving to work because I'm in New York, and suddenly I hear beautiful music and it reminded me of something. So I wrote it something, right? It reminded me when I was dancing with my boyfriend at this party. I came home and I said, dear Miriam, today I'm going to write about my boyfriend. And I wrote a little story of 2-3 pages. Another time, again, I drive to work and suddenly I see a factory. And from the chimney comes, soot and smoke, and suddenly I remembered of Auschwitz. I started to think of Auschwitz where there are 4 chimneys, sometimes all of them were spewing flames, and we knew that new transports had arrived. And so many things happened in Auschwitz, so I went home. For days I wrote the story of Auschwitz under the title Chimneys. And every day I wrote and wrote and wrote hundreds of letters. And those letters selected became my book, Tell the Children, Letters from Me. And in this book, They are individual letters written for teenagers because they are for my grandchildren. And I put them in chapters. Chapters of living in Sighet, chapter of arriving to Auschwitz, chapter of Auschwitz, chapter of getting to another camp, chapter of getting out of Auschwitz upon liberation. So each one is a short story. Now I'm going to tell you two of these stories just to see the essence how I wrote those stories. One story that usually my teenagers like, it is called the shoe story. You remember when we arrived to Auschwitz and we had to undress, they said, keep only the shoes. They didn't have enough shoes to give us. So I had my shoes, and then a few weeks later I started to work, march every day to work, and the shoes got ruined. The sole came off. So I went to the supervisor of the barrack and I said, I don't have shoes anymore. How can I go to work? She says, okay, tomorrow morning, wait for me at the entrance of the barrack. I take you to the shoe place. The following morning, there were 5 girls who needed shoes. And she took us to the shoe place. And you know what the shoe place was? It was obvious. She took us to the railroad station, where after all the people entered the camps, there were hundreds of suitcases and bundles and luggages, and hundreds of girls worked to sort them. Open the baggage, right, and open and see what it is. The good things went in one part to send to Germany. The used thing was another part to be used in camp. And they made piles. They made a pile of dresses, a pile of shoes, a pile of whatever, suitcases, a pile of artificial eggs. Can you imagine? Artificial eggs in a pile. Everything went on piles. So our supervisor took us to the pile of shoes. He said, get the pair of shoes. Now, those girls working there didn't care if they found the red shoe to get the pair of the red shoe. They found the right shoe. They looked at the left shoe, the same size. Only that is what they cared. They tied it together. It is good to be worn in the camp. So here I try a few pairs of shoes. It had to be soft because I didn't have socks. I always had blisters. And they fit my size, and I get them. One is brown and one is black. And I took them, put them on. And the following morning, I walked to work in these so-called new shoes. They were well used. And as I marched to work, suddenly I realized somewhere in front there is a pair of legs, and one leg has a pair of my brown shoe. I got very excited, right? Who knows? Maybe I can get the shoe. And we arrived to work, and when we prepared to start working, I go and I find the girl with the brown shoe. And I tell her, listen, you have a brown shoe and a beige shoe. I have a brown and a black. Would you give me the brown shoe? I give you my other brown shoe. No, give me the brown shoe. I give you my black shoe. She says, why should I give it to you? You give it to me. I want to have a pair of matching shoes. And she wouldn't give me. The following morning, we start all over again. And the day after, and after, every morning, we are just arguing. And all my friends are laughing. She wouldn't give the brown shoe, and I wouldn't give her the brown shoe. And one day, I didn't see the girl anymore, and I didn't know what happened to her. And a friend of her brought me the following day the brown shoe. So what is the question? What happened to that girl, right? The friend told us that the girl got sick. She was taken to the infirmary. And when she arrived there and started to talk to the other patients, she was told, don't expect to get back to work. This is not this place. You are going to be selected. From here we go into the crematorium. You don't go back to work. And when she found out and believed this, when her friend came to visit, she gave her the brown shoe to bring it to me. Well, this is a story in which I wanted to show that there are still some feelings, left. Still some, some good feelings, but that she sent me those brown shoes. Another story. I want 2 more stories to tell you. The other story happened At the end of for 7 months I was in Auschwitz, I told you. It was summer, it was fall, it was raining, the factories have closed by now. And we heard the Russians very close. They were bombing, and we knew the Russians would be coming. And we said that if the Russians comes, they will be liberated, but who knows, they might kill us. There is still one crematorium working. So we were very, very anxious. What can we do to save ourselves? It turned out that we realized that once in a while, civilians came to the camp to choose a few girls for the factory, for the working camp. And we realized getting to a working camp where they don't have crematoriums and gas chambers is a chance to stay alive. So whenever we saw people coming to choose girls, we ran, and we had a long, long line. I never got them to be chosen. But one day, December 21, 1944, it's such an important day for me. We saw 2 civilians entering the camp, and we all ran. My whole barrack ran and stayed in line. And the guy is counting, 1, 2, 3, 200. And he said, I don't need more, you go back to your barracks. And I am the 5th or the 6th in a row, and I'm desperate. I'm so desperate that I got an idea. And they said that when you are desperate, don't lose it. Just have ideas. And I scream in German, I'm a draftsman, I know how to draw, take me. And they took me. Okay, 201. And on that day, they took the 201 girls to disinfection. They gave them clean clothes, they put them on a train, and they shipped us to occupied Czechoslovakia, to a working camp near the factory. So I got rid of Auschwitz, and I said, I saved my life, at least from Auschwitz, okay? If I would have stayed in Auschwitz, 2 months later, the Russians came. And when the Russians came, the Nazis gathered all the able-bodied girls into marches in the middle of the winter to other camps in Germany. And they chased them and they called, right? They let them sleep on the floor. They shot them and they couldn't walk. And that was called the Death March. I escaped the Death March. I was in a factory and I was working in a... It's a factory worker. And you know something? A month later, I heard my name, not my name. Who is the girl who is a draftsman? And that is when they put me in an office together with German and other civilians. And so we could live, okay? And I stayed now 5 months in that working camp. And working camp had no crematorium, had no gas chambers. They beat us, they starved us, they worked us, but we lived. Now came spring, the third story. It is spring. It is, by now, March. It's warm, right? It is April, and we hear the Russians coming. We hear them bombing, right? And we all hope if they come, right, maybe we'll be alive and they will save us, right? And one day, May 6, 1945, you know when the war ended? May 8. So 2 days before the end of the war, probably the Russians, 3 villages far from the camp. We get up in the morning, and the guards had left. They ran away. They dropped their uniforms, they put on civilian clothes, and they melted with the refugee population. They were not there. So now we are free, but we are still in clothes. Everybody runs to the kitchen and brings potatoes, and we make fire, and we burn even the chairs. We are free, 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 and we eat the potatoes. We cannot find salt, we find sugar and potatoes is very good. And then, I don't know how this happened. Probably one smart girl said, let's go to the guards' quarter and see what we can find there. Okay, a group runs to the guards' quarter. And sure, they find boots and jackets and this and that. What did I find? I found a notebook and a pen. I didn't have a notebook for a year. I took the notebook and I took the pen, and very, very happily I went back to my bunk bed. I sat down and I wrote in the notebook, today is May 6, 1945. Freedom. How can you express this in one word? And I started to write the journal. I wrote the journal for 12 days because in the 12 days we couldn't leave yet. The Czech population were so nice who lived there. They said, don't leave, the roads are not good, there are no bridges, there are no buses, right? You won't stay until they fix them, and we will feed you, and they fed us, they gave us food, put on in 12 days about 12 pounds at least, and ate and cooked, and finally they said, the roads are clean, you can start your trip home. And I remember that I was writing my last notes in my journal, and I said, tomorrow we are leaving. The Czech people being so nice assured us, right, that we can walk home. And I wanted to go home. Not everybody wanted to go home. They knew there's no one home. They went to refugee camps to get somewhere else. But they were a group of girls who wanted to go home. And it took us 2 weeks in the war-torn country, right? To get on a train, to get on a jeep with a soldier, to get further and further to arrive first to Budapest and Hungary, and then to arrive. And I remember that my last note in my journal was this: I'm going home. Do I have a home? Is anybody waiting for me home? Are my parents there? Are my brothers there? Is my boyfriend there? My relatives? Well, I arrived home. There was no home. A gypsy family has moved into our apartment. No, my parents were not home, which I didn't expect, even when I had hopes. No, my 2 brothers were with me, didn't come home. No, other brothers were not there. The relatives didn't come home. But my boyfriend was home, waiting for me to get home. And this is the end of my story. Thank you very much.